Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, not with wind whipping your face or the roar of a sea below, but in silence. Beneath you is not water, but time, a deep chasm of wasted hours, missed connections, numbed dreams, and fractured attention. You're not falling yet, but your toes are over the edge, and you didn't even notice when you walked there. You just kept scrolling. Now look down. Every half-finished book you never returned to, every conversation you weren't really present for, every time you opened your phone to escape boredom, it's all echoing up from below, faint, like whispers from a life that was almost yours. You tell yourself it's not that serious, that you're just tired, that you'll get your focus back tomorrow. But you've said that before. So have millions of others. But what if I told you the most dangerous weapon pointed at your brain isn't a chemical, a machine, or even a Liba truth, weaponized through repetition and distraction until it ceases to mean anything at all? Here's the paradox no one wants to admit. In the age of infinite knowledge, we are starving for wisdom, surrounded by more content than any generation in history, yet barely able to sit in silence for more than a minute. We confuse stimulation with learning, novelty with growth, connectivity with connection. Your brain, this sacred, once silent cathedral of this, become a dumping ground for other people's opinions, curated outrage, algorithmic seduction, and flashing trivia dressed up as truth. And here's the kicker. It's not even your fault. You didn't choose to feed your mind this poison. You were trained, conditioned, groomed into it. Like the frog in boiling water, you were dropped into comfort, pacification, and convenience until you forgot what clarity even felt like. But something in you knows. You feel it when you lie in bed at night, too tired to think yet too agitated to sleep. You feel it when you're surrounded by friends but crave something more real. You feel it in those sudden stabs of meaninglessness that hit you between dopamine spikes. You sense that something isn't right, not just in the world, but within you. Here's the terrifying question. What if the very things you feed your brain every day are slowly killing you, not in body, but in soul? What if attention, the last sacred currency of selfhood, has been hijacked, fragmented, and repackaged so effectively that you now choose your own decay? And even more chilling, what if you mistake that decay for comfort? Imagine this. You wake up in a fog, not the kind from lack of sleep, but a deeper kind, like your mind is running on yesterday's leftovers. You open your phone before your eyes even adjust, before your first conscious thought has even formed. You've already absorbed 20 opinions, 3 outrage posts, a half-naked influencer, and a trending soundbite about something that doesn't matter. You haven't even started the day, and already your brain has become someone else's battleground. You go to work, but your thoughts aren't whole. They scatter like dust every time a notification pings. You want to focus, but the mind rebels. It twitches, searches, fidgets. Like an addict, it begs for a fix, a scroll, a headline, a hit of novelty. You comply. You tell yourself it's harmless, just a quick check. But it never is, because you're not consuming anymore. You're being consumed. You see, this isn't about phones or media or dopamine. It's deeper, much deeper. This is about the slow erosion of self, about feeding the mind so many fragments, distractions, and illusions that it forgets how to be whole. About trading solitude for noise, reflection for reaction, depth for dopamine. Why? Because we were never taught to protect the sanctity of the mind. No one warned us that a distracted life is not just an inefficient one, it's an unexamined one. And the unexamined life, as Socrates warned, is not worth living. So here's the question again, sharpened like a blade. What are you feeding your mind? And who taught you to crave it? Before you answer, Pause, not just with your breath, but with your being. Because this isn't about guilt or blame, it's about awakening. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not beyond repair, but you are at war. And the enemy is not outside you, it's the invisible drip of input that you never questioned, the mental habits you never chose, and the slow, silent murder of your inner world through constant stimulation. So now, step back from that cliff. Not because it's too late, but because it's not. Not yet. But to walk away, you must understand why you ended up here in the first place. To do that, we must go deeper into the hidden architecture of your mind, the traps built not just by society, but by the ancient machinery of your own psychology. Ready to see what's really pulling the strings? You weren't born fragmented. You came into this world with a mind as still as a mountain lake, deep, reflective, vast. But over time, something shifted. Not in an obvious cinematic way. No villain in a cloak. No dramatic betrayal. Just a quiet corrosion. A slow drift away from the depths and into the noise. You might think this is just the cost of modern life stress, technology, responsibilities. But the roots go far deeper than convenience or screens. This isn't merely about distraction. It's about a fundamental loss of inner sovereignty. And to understand why, we must walk through the ruins of a forgotten truth. Your mind was never built to consume this much. Evolution crafted you for immediacy, presence, and survival. For noticing the rustle in the bushes, not doom scrolling through the collapse of civilization while eating cereal. Your ancestors sat under the stars and listened to silence. They knew the weight of words, the power of stillness. They had minds tuned for meaning, not momentum. But the world changed faster than your psychology did. Carl Jung once warned that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And now, more than ever, you are being possessed by ideas not your own. Trained to seek validation rather than truth. Conditioned to confuse reaction with thinking. We like to believe we're thinking beings who sometimes feel. But as the great Arthur Schopenhauer noted, we are feeling beings who occasionally think, and those feelings manipulated by the machinery of modern life air, the gateway drug to mental manipulation. Consider this. Why do you open your phone when you're sad, bored, or uncertain? Not to solve the sadness, not to face the boredom, but to escape. And that escape becomes the pattern. The pattern becomes the addiction. And the addiction becomes the architecture of your identity. It's not random. It's systemic. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, predicted a society not oppressed by pain, but anesthetized by pleasure. He foresaw a humanity so thoroughly entertained, distracted, and pacified that it would willingly trade its freedom for comfort. Look around. We live in the age of the infinite buffet for the mind, for the senses, for the ego. But with every bite, we become less aware of what hunger even is. The mind, no longer challenged, begins to rot under the weight of trivia and trend. You've been sold a lie disguised as empowerment. More input means more knowledge. But in truth, more input without integration means less self. And now, beneath the chaos, another force pulls the strings. The need to be seen. Jean-Paul Sartre called it the gaze of the other. The idea that we come to see ourselves through how we are perceived. Once, that gaze was from a few close individuals. Now, it's from thousands of strangers, filtered through algorithms and dopamine loops. We don't just perform for the world. We perform for a simulation of the world. A curated, numerical reflection of self-worth in hearts, views, and shares. And each performance costs you a piece of your inner life. What happens when your thoughts are no longer your own? When your reactions are pre-scripted by your environment? when your identity is outsourced to a feed that updates every minute. You become what philosopher Byung-Chul Han calls a burnout subject, driven to exhaustion not by work, but by the pressure to constantly optimize, respond, and exist as a product. This is the hidden problem. Not distraction, not laziness, not even addiction, but the slow disintegration of the inner life. You were born with an interiority, a sacred space, where thoughts fermented, where wonder lived, where meaning could take root. But now, that space is flooded with noise. You no longer have thoughts. You host them. Thoughts that scream louder win. Thoughts that offer novelty, rage, or comfort are rewarded. So how do you navigate a world like this? Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow." But what if your why has been buried beneath 1,000 recycled opinions and trending ideologies? What if you've inherited your desires without questioning their origin? Most people are not suffering from a lack of information. They're drowning in it. They're not lacking purpose. They're buried under false ones. There's a term in psychology: cognitive load, the amount of information your working memory can hold at once. Exceed it, and your ability to think deeply collapses. You can still function, but you can't reflect. You can still react, but you can't remember who you are. This is not a glitch in the system. It is the system, because a fragmented mind is easier to sell to. A distracted mind is easier to manage. A reactive mind is easier to manipulate. You were not meant to be this programmable. You were not meant to consume 10 voices a day and still hear your own. You were not meant to live with a brain in open tab mode, never resting, never closing. And yet, here we are. So what do you do with this knowledge? Most will look away. It's easier, more comfortable to scroll than to see the machine for what it is. But something in you is still awake, isn't it? Something in you remembers silence, remembers stillness, remembers self. The most dangerous thing you can do in this world is think for yourself. Not because it's rebellious, but because it's rare. So here's the next question. If the food you've been feeding your mind is killing you, what happens when you stop? Not just stop scrolling, but stop complying. Stop buying into the speed. Stop mistaking attention for presence. Because the mind can be reclaimed, but only if you're willing to face what happens when the noise is turned off. And that's where we go next. To the consequences of this unseen infection, the costs hidden in plain sight. The subtle ways your brain, your relationships, your very soul is being reshaped by what you consume. The world hasn't told you the price, but it's time to calculate it. Imagine a mirror so fogged you forget your own face. Now imagine trying to make life decisions, career, love, meaning while staring into that blurred reflection. That's what it's like to live in a distracted mind. Every thought refracted, every impulse distorted, every choice echoing with someone else's voice. But the tragedy is, you don't notice the fog until something breaks. You lose something, the dream, a relationship, a piece of joy, and you can't quite explain why. It didn't shatter, it dissolved. That's how it works. Slowly, invisibly, completely. This isn't about the obvious costs, not the wasted hours or the missed tasks. Those are visible, calculable. But what about the erosion of wonder, the slow death of awe, the fading ability to sit with a question without Googling the answer in 2 seconds? You think your mind is intact because it still functions. But function is not the same as freedom. Let's talk about the deeper costs, the ones you can't quantify, but feel in your bones. 1. Fragmented identity. Your sense of self isn't built in a vacuum. It's crafted through reflection, tension, and solitude. But today, that process is constantly interrupted. Notifications pull your attention outward. Feeds tell you what to care about, and little by little, yourself becomes a collage of reactions rather than a coherent story. In psychology, this is called ego diffusion, the weakening of the inner narrative that ties your memories, beliefs, and goals together. When that thread frays, you start to feel like a stranger to yourself. You say things like, "I don't know what I want anymore," or "I feel lost," but you're not lost. You're overstimulated and underconnected to your core. You haven't lost direction. You've lost quiet. 2. Emotional blunting. You weren't built to feel everything, all at once, all the time. The human nervous system evolved in tribes where you might encounter one tragedy a month maybe. But now, you see 10 before breakfast. Bombings, injustice, outrage, heartbreak, each headline designed to hijack your empathy. So what happens? You go numb, not because you don't care, because you can't care about everything and survive. That numbness, that constant low-level despair, that's not apathy. It's emotional exhaustion, a side effect of synthetic omnipresence. As Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. But the more you numb yourself with noise, the harder it becomes to feel real joy, real sorrow, real aliveness. You become a ghost of yourself hovering just above your own life." 3. Loss of deep work and flow. There was a time when hours could vanish in creativity, when you could fall into a task so fully the world disappeared. That state what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi called flow is the bedrock of human fulfillment. It's where mastery is born. But flow requires uninterrupted attention, and attention is now a battleground. Cognitive science tells us it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to deep focus after an interruption. And how often are you interrupted per hour? Be honest. You think you're multitasking. You're not. You're context switching rapidly. And every switch bleeds energy. Every switch dulls clarity. The result? You finish the day exhausted but unfulfilled, busy but unaccomplished, stimulated but empty. You didn't just lose time. You lost potential, fear. Hijacked value systems. What do you think you care about? Success? Love? Integrity? Depth? Be careful. Because in a world run by metrics, what you care about is increasingly shaped by what you see rewarded. Likes, shares, viralities become the new compasses. Not truth, but traction. You don't believe in that game, you say. But it's already under your skin. When you hesitate before sharing something real, when you adjust your opinion to fit the dominant narrative, when you crave applause more than authenticity, that's not cowardice. That's conditioning. And if you're not vigilant, the world will hand you a prepackaged value system. Polished, popular, profitable, but completely unlived. As Nietzsche warned, be careful when you gaze into the abyss, for the abyss gazes also into you. Now the abyss has a brand, a hashtag, an algorithm. 5. The death of original thought. Here's a brutal truth. Most people haven't had an original thought in years, not because they're stupid, but because originality requires mental space. It requires boredom. It requires silence. And we've built a world where those things are seen as problems to be solved, where every pause must be filled, every stillness disrupted, every question answered before it ripens. The philosopher Simone Weil once wrote, "Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer." But what have we done with attention? We've auctioned it off to the highest bidder. And in doing so, we've lost something holy. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, I get it. This is bad. But is it really that serious? Yes, it is. Because this isn't just about distraction. This is about existential theft. You are being robbed slowly, politely, efficiently, of the life you were meant to live. Not a life of ease or perfection, but of presence, of focus, of alignment between your values and your actions. And the worst part, you might never notice it happening, because the tools doing it come dressed as convenience, as entertainment, as just 5 minutes. But those minutes add up. They become years. They become you. So now you face a choice: not tomorrow, not after this video. Now, will you continue feeding your brain the cognitive junk food that numbs you? Or will you begin the rebellion? Not against technology, not against the world, but against the passive self. The self that waits, scrolls, numbs, complies. Because change doesn't begin with detox. It begins with defiance. Are you ready to remember who you were before the noise? Good. Then let's begin the rebellion. Rebellion doesn't start with fire. It starts with a pause, a moment where you stop. You close the tab. You silence the feed. And in that stillness, something ancient begins to steer a quiet voice, faint and unfamiliar, because it's been drowned out for years. It's you, the real you, not the curated avatar, not the reactive impulse machine, but the sovereign mind beneath the noise, the rebel, the watcher, the architect. But before you can reclaim your mind, you must understand. This isn't about productivity hacks or screen time limits. This is spiritual warfare. This is the battle for your interior freedom. The world will not hand that back to you. You must take it. And the first weapon in your arsenal is the most underestimated force in modern life: silence. 1. Relearn the art of silence. Silence terrifies people, not because it's empty, but because it's honest. It reveals what's been buried under the flood of input: fear, longing, confusion, truth. Most flee from it. Rebels walk straight into it. Sit in a room without stimulation. No phone, no music, just breath and thought. Do it long enough, and the chaos in your head will scream. Good. That's detox. That's your mind reorienting itself toward coherence. You've been mentally multitasking for years. Now, you are reclaiming your cognitive sovereignty. Silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of self. And it is in silence that rebellion takes root. 2. Defy the tyranny of novelty. You've been taught to chase the new post, new trend, new notification. Novelty is the bait, but behind it is a cage. A mind constantly stimulated never matures. It flits, it flirts, but it cannot commit. It cannot grow roots. The rebellion begins when you stop seeking what's new and start returning to what's true. Read the same paragraph 5 times until it breaks you open. Reread old books. Sit with one idea for an hour. Not 10, not 50, just 1. Depth is forged in repetition. Becoming whole isn't about adding more. It's about choosing less, better. 3. Reject the performance of self. Stop performing. You are not content. You are not a brand. You are not here to be perceived. Take something precious, your art, your opinion, your pain, and don't post it. Let it live in the dark, where meaning forms. Sartre spoke of the hell of always being watched. In today's digital panopticon, you're not just watched, you're measured, judged, gamified. That pressure warps you. It forces you to filter your truth until nothing remains but palatable noise. Real rebellion is privacy. Real freedom is opacity. Let parts of you be unseen. Let your life exist beyond metrics. Not everything sacred needs an audience. 4. Slow everything down. Your attention didn't fragment all at once. It was chipped away by speed, by urgency, by the illusion that faster is better. Rebellion is the deliberate choice to slow down. Walk slower, breathe slower, read slower, respond slower. Slowness is not laziness. It's resistance to manipulation. When you move slowly, you can see the traps before you fall into them. You can notice the subtle lies. You can think clearly enough to say no. Fast minds obey. Slow minds decide. 5. Make time sacred again. You don't spend time, you sacrifice it. Every moment is a trade, and what you trade it for reveals what you worship. Look at your day. What's on the altar? Mindless scrolling? Manufactured outrage? Shallow conversations? If so, the rebellion must be ritualized. You must consecrate time. Wake up and protect your first hour. No input, no screens, just thought, stillness, movement, or creation. What you do in that sacred space will bleed into everything else. You are not reclaiming time. You are reclaiming reverence. 6. Rebuild your mind like a temple. Imagine your mind is a temple. What are you letting through the doors? Would you allow someone to scream insults in your sanctuary? Would you tolerate noise, trash, distraction inside a sacred space? Then why do you tolerate it in your mind? Be ruthless in your inputs. Curate your reality like your soul depends on it, because it does. Unfollow noise. Mute chaos. Turn off the faucet of pseudo-information. Feed your mind like a monk feeds his body with intention, with gratitude, and with restraint. 7. Relearn how to be bored. Boredom is not your enemy. It's your threshold. It's the door between distraction and depth. Sit with it long enough, and boredom becomes vision, imagination, clarity. Why do you think the algorithm never lets you get bored? Because boredom leads to introspection, and introspection leads to awakening. If you remembered who you really are, you wouldn't need any of what they're selling. Boredom is the crucible of the true self. Stop escaping it. Start listening to it. 8. Choose creation over consumption. Every time you create, you reclaim your agency. It doesn't matter if it's good. It matters that it's yours. Write, draw, speak, build. Not for approval, not for content, but because creating is the antidote to passive decay. You are not a consumer. You are a creator. You were born not to react but to respond, to shape, to express. Start small. Create badly, but create, because every act of creation is an act of war against the machine. The rebellion is internal. You will not be congratulated for this. There is no applause for reclaiming your mind. No algorithm will reward you. No crowd will cheer. The world does not profit from your clarity, but you will. You will begin to feel again. Think again. Want again, not what the feed tells you to want, but what you want. You will become dangerous not in the way of violence, but in the way of truth. A person who knows who they are cannot be controlled, cannot be sold to, cannot be seduced by shallow things. This is the quiet revolution, not loud, not viral, but seismic. And it begins the moment you say, enough. Now that you've broken free from the cycle, there is one final realization waiting. One that changes everything. One truth that, once seen, will make the madness of this world finally make sense. Are you ready to see the ultimate source of the hunger? Are you ready to learn the truth you've been running from all along? Then step forward, because what comes next is not escape, it's awakening. You made it this far. That already makes you rare. Most people stop at discomfort. They scroll away. They go back to sleep. But you walked through the noise. You questioned the architecture of your mind. You tasted silence. You began the rebellion. But now, You stand at the final threshold, the place where most truths become unbearable, where the lights come on, and there's no one else to blame. No screens, no algorithms, no system, just you and the question that everything else has been circling. Why did you feed your brain what was killing it in the first place? Why did you reach for comfort over clarity? Why did you allow noise to replace knowing? Why did you offer up your attention again and again to things that left you emptier than before? Here is the ultimate truth. The mind does not hunger for information. It hungers for meaning, and meaning terrifies us, because real meaning requires real confrontation of mortality, of suffering, of responsibility. It cannot be packaged. It cannot be optimized. It demands that you stand alone, without distraction, and look straight into the abyss of life and say, I am here. I choose to matter. I choose to see. But that kind of seeing, it breaks illusions. It burns comfort. It strips you naked of every excuse. And this is the part no one wants to admit. You weren't just fed mental poison. You craved it. You wanted the endless scroll. You wanted the outrage carousel. You wanted the dopamine rush of shallow novelty, because it let you avoid yourself. The real fear isn't that the world is broken. The real fear is that you might be complicit in keeping it that way. It's easier to blame the feed than to admit you've been hiding in it. It's easier to blame society than to sit with the aching truth. You traded your own depth for distraction. You sold your silence for stimulation. You gave away your freedom not because it was stolen, but because it was heavy. We live in a culture obsessed with being seen, but terrified of being known even to ourselves. So we curate, we distract, we run. But here, at the edge of this realization, the ground shifts, and if you're brave enough, something astonishing begins to happen. You stop trying to fill the void, you start listening to it, and you realize the void was never empty. It was waiting for you to stop feeding your mind crumbs of false connection, waiting for you to stop outsourcing your identity to attention metrics, waiting for you to remember that you are not a product, not a profile, not a pattern of consumption. You are consciousness, living, questioning, becoming, and you were never meant to fit comfortably into a system that profits from your fragmentation. The final shift, from reaction to revelation. Once you stop feeding your mind the noise, something radical happens. You begin to think thoughts that aren't recycled. You begin to feel in colors instead of content. You begin to remember the texture of your own life and not through photos, but through presence. And then something sacred cracks open. You stop asking what the world wants from you. You begin asking, what does my soul require of me? This question cannot be Googled. It cannot be scrolled into. It can only be lived into moment by moment, silence by silence, breath by breath. And the answer is never loud. It is a whisper, a flicker, a direction. But once you hear it, truly hear it, nothing the world offers will ever satisfy you again. Because the truth is, you don't want more input. You want integration. You want the scattered pieces of yourself to come home, and they will, when you stop feeding the noise, when you stop mistaking reaction for reality, when you stop begging the world to tell you who you are. The return. Imagine now waking up tomorrow. No morning scroll, no panic to catch up, just stillness. And from that stillness, direction. Not imposed by a feed, but born from within. You drink your coffee slowly. You walk with intention. You create something without needing anyone to see it. And in those quiet moments, you feel it. The weight of your own soul returning to your body. Not as a concept, not as a performance, but as truth. This is what it means to wake up. Not just from the algorithm, not just from the system, but from the illusion that your worth lives outside of you, because it never did. A final question. So now, here we are at the end of this path. You've seen the machine. You've felt the decay. You've tasted rebellion. You've stood at the edge of your own forgetting. And you've remembered. Now ask yourself, what will you feed your mind today? Not tomorrow. Not when it's easy. Not when you've finally fixed everything. Now. In this moment. With this breath. Will you reach for the shortcut, the scroll, the next hit of novelty? Or will you reach inward? Because the greatest revolution is not external. It's not in destroying the system. It's in no longer needing it. You were never meant to be endlessly stimulated. You were meant to be deeply awake. You were never meant to consume. You were meant to become. And now, you remember. Let that memory become your compass. Let it burn away the fog. Let it lead you not to comfort, not to ease, but to meaning, to the life you were meant to live before the noise began. You are no longer asleep. You are no longer compliant. You are no longer feeding your brain what kills it. You are awake. Now go build a mind that reflects it, a life that proves it, a world that remembers it. The end of the noise is not silence. It's the beginning of everything.